Commerce, the carriage of goods from one place to another. That is what the maritime world is all about. There are military navies either engaged in or waiting for the next call to arms, but that is a minuscule dot compared to peacetime trade. The port of Arklow has been part of that trade for a long time, centuries. No one can say when our maritime history began. One of the seaboard settlements on Ptolemy's map of Ireland in the 2nd century AD was called Menapia. There is a strong argument that Menapia stood on the site of present-day Arklow. Academics tell us there were no towns as we know them in Ireland before the Vikings came in the dying years of the 8th century. Be that as it may, there was something here which the cartographer felt deserved its place on his map. On the north side of the river is the marsh, a geological remnant of the wide estuary which gave the locality its Irish name, An Tinvermore. In the 9th century, the natural harbour offered a safe haven for the Vikings who settled here. They made sporadic forays further inland, and when things became too hot for them, they simply slipped their moorings and escaped to sea, to return at a more advantageous time. It was the Vikings who gave the town the name it still bears. Arklow is a combination of Arnkell, a Norse personal name, and Low, meaning a low-lying meadow near water. The Norsemen eventually integrated with the indigenous people, and what they had taken in loot over a relatively short period was compensated for by the skills they brought with them. Seamanship was their forte. Their boats were without pier, and their skill in handling and building the vessels passed into the heritage of Arklow. In 1169 came the Normans. They replaced the Viking stronghold on a hill overlooking the deepest part of the river with a sturdier, more permanent structure. This section of the river is still known as Powell or Pound Achally, probably a corruption of the Gaelic Powell Achally, which means harbour pool. Throughout the Middle Ages, the people of Arklow continued to eke their livelihood from the sea. Its strategic importance was evident in 1313 when Edmund Butler, the local Norman lord, had supplies sent to his troops in Arklow by ship. In 1399, Richard II's army was engaged in a campaign against Art MacMurrough Kavanagh. Kavanagh's guerrilla tactics left the English without food, and they were saved from starvation by the arrival of supply ships from Dublin here at Arklow. Again in 1649, Cromwell's army, on its march towards Wexford, were met at Arklow with supply ships. But such events are merely milestones in history. The long, tortuous route of everyday life is what has shaped the town and port of modern Arklow. Men with more constructive aims were trading between Arklow and continental ports in the 16th century. The fishing industry was also gradually developing. This map from 1513 shows Arklow as one of the main fishing ports in the country. It can be seen more clearly in this modern representation. By 1784, 27 fishing boats were recorded as being owned in Arklow, employing 205 men. The nature of the harbour had changed very little over the centuries. The facilities available in the 18th century were no different to those of 1,000 years earlier. Boats were simply pulled up on the beach as the river was too shallow to accommodate them. In 1791, the first survey was carried out by William Chapman. This encouraged the mining interests at Avoca, 6 miles upriver, to obtain the rights of development of the port from Parliament. A retaining wall was built on the north side of the river, and this was gradually extended and a new access to the sea cut. Despite this lack of facilities, the entire community depended on the sea for its livelihood. Apart from the men who went to sea for trade or fish, an estimated 1,000 women and children were employed in manufacturing hemp, which was used in making nets. What was surplus to local requirement was exported to Liverpool. There were 2 herring seasons, one beginning in May, the other in November, each lasting about 6 weeks. Large vessels came from Dublin and Liverpool to purchase the catches from the small local boats. By 1846, the fleet had grown to 39 decked vessels, 153 half-deckers, 57 open sailboats and 14 rowboats, all engaged in fishing along the coast, employing 1,308 men. Ashore, boat building was so brisk that there were not enough shipwrights to meet the demand. Boat building had entered a new stage in 1812, when the first schooner was built on the side of the river. There were many skilled shipwrights. The names of Tracy and Canterbury stand out, but the family which was to become inextricably associated with this enterprise was the Tyrrell family. John Tyrrell opened his yard on the south side of the river in 1864.